I never believed in monsters. Not really. I was a city guy, a software developer, who thought the only real mysteries were hidden in lines of code. The wilderness was just something you saw on a screensaver. But one bad quarterly report and a sudden layoff later, I found myself packing up my life and heading for a remote cabin in the Washington woods. I told myself I needed to unplug and find myself. Honestly, I was just running away. The first few weeks were a blur of chopping wood, learning how to make a decent fire, and feeling incredibly lonely. The silence of the forest was deafening. It wasn't peaceful. It was empty. I'd spend my nights reading by the fireplace, the crackling flames my only companion. I was on the verge of packing it all in, admitting defeat, and crawling back to the concrete jungle. Then came the storm. It wasn't just rain. It was a biblical deluge. The wind howled like a wounded animal, and branches snapped and crashed against my little cabin. The power, of course, went out immediately. I was huddled by the fire, nursing a cup of lukewarm tea, when I heard it. A sound that wasn't the storm. It was a high-pitched, mournful cry. It sounded like a child, lost and terrified. My first thought was that a hiker's kid had gotten separated from their parents. A stupid, reckless thought, I know. But I couldn't just sit there. I grabbed my strongest flashlight, pulled on my rain gear, and stepped out into the chaos. The wind nearly tore the door from my hand. I yelled out, "Hello? Is anyone out there?" Only the screaming wind answered. I followed the crying sound, which came and went with the gusts of wind. It led me deeper into the woods than I'd ever gone before. The beam of my flashlight cut through the rain, illuminating a world of thrashing trees and swirling leaves. After what felt like an hour, the crying grew weaker, closer. I found it at the base of a massive fallen cedar tree. It wasn't a human child. Curled into a tight ball, shivering violently, was a creature covered in thick, matted brown fur. It was small, maybe the size of a 3-year-old, with large, dark eyes that reflected my flashlight's beam with a look of pure terror. Its face was surprisingly human-like, with a flat nose and a small mouth. There was whimpering softly, my mind relayed. I tried to make sense of it. A bear cub? A weird monkey? But no, my gut, a part of me I didn't know existed, screamed a different word. Bigfoot. It was a baby and it was freezing, soaked to the bone. Every rational instinct told me to run. This was impossible. This was dangerous. Where there's a baby, there's a mother. And I did not want to meet Mama Bigfoot. But looking at this little creature, trembling and alone, my fear was replaced by something else. Pity. Compassion. I couldn't just leave it here to die. Slowly, cautiously, I approached. "Hey there," I whispered, my voice shaking. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." It flinched, trying to press itself deeper into the mud. I took off my heavy rain jacket and gently draped it over the small, shivering body. It was a risk, but it felt like the only human thing to do. The creature stopped whimpering for a moment and just looked at me with those enormous, intelligent eyes. There was a moment of silent negotiation. Then I scooped it up. It was surprisingly light, all fur and bone. It didn't fight meat. Husterdorf went limp, burying its face in my chest. Carrying this impossible being, I stumbled my way back to the cabin. Inside, I set it down on the old rug in front of the fireplace. It immediately curled up, drawn to the warmth, its little body still shaking. I got some old towels and gently started to dry its fur. It was surprisingly soft beneath the matted outer layer. I didn't have any food it could eat, so I just poured a small bowl of water and placed it nearby. For the rest of the night, I just sat there, watching it. The storm raged on outside, but inside my little cabin, there was this bubble of surreal calm. As it wormed up, its breathing evened out, and it fell into a deep sleep. I watched the rise and fall of its chest, this mythical creature from campfire stories, sleeping by my fire. My loneliness from the past few weeks evaporated. It wasn't just me and the fire anymore. It was us. The next morning, the storm had passed. The world was washed clean, and sunlight streamed through the window. My little guest was awake, sitting up and looking around the cabin with an intense curiosity. It looked at the books on my shelves, the pot on the stove, my laptop sitting on the table. When our eyes met, it made a soft rumbling sound, almost like a purr. I spent the day with it. I tried feeding it some apple slices, which it nibbled on cautiously before devouring the rest. We didn't play. Not really. But there was a connection. It would follow me around the cabin, watching my every move. I called him Buddy. I know, not very creative, but it felt right. He would touch things gently with his long fingers, examining them before looking back at me, as if asking for an explanation. I found myself talking to him, explaining what a book was, what a coffee pot did. I hadn't talked that much in months. That afternoon, as the sun began to set, I heard a new sound from the woods. It was a deep, resonant call, a series of whoops and hollers that vibrated through the floorboards. Buddy heard it too. He immediately stood up, his ears perked, and answered with a high-pitched cry of his own. The call from the woods came again, closer this time. I knew what was happening. His family was looking for him. A wave of sadness washed over me, which was ridiculous. I'd known this creature for less than 24 hours, but he had changed something in my world. I opened the cabin door. Buddy looked at me, then at the open door, then back at me. He walked over and, for a brief moment, pressed his head against my leg. A thank you. A goodbye. Then he was gone, a small brown shape disappearing into the twilight of the trees. I stood at the doorway for a long time, listening until the forest fell silent again. The next morning, the cabin felt empty again, but it was a different kind of empty. It wasn't lonely anymore. It was quiet. It was peaceful. I went outside and found something on my porch, a small, neat pile of iridescent bird feathers and a perfectly shaped, smooth river stone. A gift. I never saw Buddy again, but his visit changed everything. I stopped running from my life. I found a new purpose, not in code, but in the world around me. The forest was no longer a silent, empty place. It was alive, full of secrets and wonders, full of the possibility that you might find something incredible when you least expect it. I didn't go back to the city. This is my home now, and every now and then, when the wind is just right, I think I can hear a distant, familiar call from deep in the woods, and I smile. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. They're meant to be lived. Thanks for listening to my story. If you've ever had an experience you can't explain, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. And if you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing for more Tales from the Wild. See you next time.